Harsh, mocking laughter cut through the crisp autumn air of the playground, the words spoken in sharp, guttural German. A young boy sat motionless in his wheelchair, the target of their cruelty. From the shadows of the play structure, a little girl emerged, her clothing frayed but her posture resolute, as she answered them in their own language, her German accent perfect and unwavering. The playground chatter died instantly. From inside his parked sedan, the billionaire watching the scene unfold felt a jolt of disbelief, yet even he could not fathom the chain of events that this single moment would set into motion. The wind sweeping off Lake Michigan carried a distinct chill across the grounds of Lincoln Park Elementary, but it was nothing compared to the coldness of the ridicule directed at 6-year-old Leo Sterling. Confined to his power wheelchair at the base of the towering slide, he watched the other children scramble and play, a deep well of longing in his gaze. A rare neuromuscular disorder had stolen the strength from his legs 2 years earlier, imprisoning him in the chair. "Look at him," sneered Bryce Davenport, a third grader whose father worked as a junior attaché at the German consulate. His clique, composed of the children of diplomats and corporate executives, echoed his laughter on cue. Leo understood enough German from his tutors to grasp the sting of their words. Tears welled in his eyes, and his small hands clenched the armrests of his chair. His father, Arthur Sterling, was a titan of the tech industry, his fortune measured in billions, yet all that wealth could not purchase the one thing Leo truly desired, the simple ability to climb that slide like any other child. From his discreetly parked Audi across the street, Arthur Sterling observed through tinted windows. He had insisted on bringing Leo to school himself that morning, dismissing the family driver. Arthur had forged Sterling systems from a garage startup into one of the nation's most influential tech firms, a testament to his relentless drive. But as he watched his son's silent suffering, he felt a profound and agonizing helplessness. Bryce continued his taunts, striding toward Leo with a look of feigned sympathy. Suddenly, a small figure stepped out from behind the slide. A little black girl, her faded pink dress adorned with carefully sewn patches and her face smudged with a streak of dirt, positioned herself directly between Leo and his tormentors. "Leave him alone," she commanded, in flawless German, her voice quiet but firm. The playground fell into a stunned silence. The color drained from Bryce's face as he stared at her, utterly bewildered. The girl then turned to Leo, her large, intelligent brown eyes meeting his. "Do you want to go down the slide?" she asked, her English soft. "I can help you." Leo, taken aback, could only manage a hesitant nod. Arthur watched, captivated, as this wisp of a girl, no older than his own son, began the arduous task of helping Leo from his wheelchair. She supported his frail body with a strength that seemed impossible for her size, and together they started to climb the ladder, one slow, painstaking step at a time. Her name, Arthur would soon learn, was Maya Jones. He noticed she coughed a few times during their ascent, a deep, rattling sound that sent a pang of concern through him. When they finally reached the summit, she gently maneuvered Leo onto the slide in front of her, then settled in behind him, wrapping her arms securely around his waist. "Ready?" she whispered into his ear. Leo's face broke into a radiant smile as they slid down together. For those few fleeting seconds, he was not the disabled son of a billionaire. He was just a boy, experiencing a simple, unadulterated moment of playground joy that other children took for granted. As Maya helped Leo back into his chair, she swayed on her feet, her face flushed from the exertion, but there was something else in her complexion, a telltale sign Arthur recognized with a sickening lurch from his wife's final illness, the distinct, unhealthy blush of a fever. In that instant, a decision formed in Arthur's mind. He stepped out of his car. This child had offered his son a gift that no amount of money could ever buy, and a powerful intuition told him that she was in desperate need of help herself, perhaps just as much as Leo was. What he couldn't possibly know was how this single, compassionate act would irrevocably alter the course of all their lives. Maya Jones had not had a full meal since the previous day, when a kind woman at the shelter, Mrs. Gable, had saved her half a turkey sandwich. But hunger was a constant companion. It was the fever that truly worried her. She had made a promise to her mother before she passed away 3 months ago. Stay strong, stay in school, and stay invisible to the Department of Children and Family Services. At 6 years old, Maya understood that the foster system meant being separated from the only family she had left. Her 9-year-old brother, Jordan, who was at that moment hidden in a derelict warehouse 3 blocks away. She settled Leo back into his wheelchair, trying to suppress another cough. "Thank you," Leo whispered, his blue eyes wide with a mixture of awe and gratitude. Before Maya could reply, a tall man in a tailored suit was walking toward them. The playground monitor, seeing him approach, hurried over. "Mr. Sterling, we weren't expecting you until dismissal." Arthur Sterling gave the monitor a curt nod, his attention fixed on Maya. "Young lady, what is your name?" he asked, his voice gentle. Maya hesitated, her experience teaching her that questions from adults often led to trouble. "Maya," she finally mumbled, taking a half-step back. "Maya what?" "Jones, sir, Maya Jones." Arthur knelt, bringing himself to her eye level, his expression softening. "Maya Jones, you did something very brave today. Not many people, children or adults, would have stood up to those boys like you did. Where are your parents? I'd like to speak with them to tell them what an exceptional daughter they have." A shadow passed over Maya's face. "My mom's gone. It's just me and Jordan now." Arthur's brow furrowed. "And Jordan is—" "My brother. He's 9. She carefully omitted any mention of his location. Leo tugged on his father's sleeve. "Dad, Maya's really cool. Can she come over to our house to play?" Arthur studied the little girl more closely now, taking in the worn-out sneakers, the unkempt hair, the feverish glint in her eyes, and her painfully thin frame. He had grown up in the steel mill town south of Chicago, and he recognized the signs of poverty and neglect all too well. "Maya, where are you and your brother staying right now?" Maya looked away, toward the chain-link fence. "Around. We get by." The playground monitor, a Miss Albright, stepped closer. "Mr. Sterling, Maya's situation is complicated. She has many unexcused absences, and she never brings a lunch. We've contacted DCFS on 2 occasions, but they've never been able to locate her or her brother." Panic flared in Maya's eyes. "I have to go," she whispered, turning to leave. "Wait," Arthur said, his tone soft but firm. "I'm not calling anyone. Leo has a doctor's appointment right now. That's why I'm here. I'd like you to come with us. The doctor could take a look at that cough, and we could all get some lunch afterward." Trust was a luxury Maya couldn't afford, but the hope in Leo's eyes, combined with the promise of a meal she might be able to save part of for Jordan, was an irresistible temptation. "My brother," she began. "We'll find him too," Arthur promised. "You won't be separated. You have my word." In the car, Leo chattered excitedly about his video games, while Maya stared, wide-eyed, at the plush leather interior and polished wood trim of the Audi. Arthur made a call to his executive assistant, speaking in low, urgent tones about locating a 9-year-old boy named Jordan near Lincoln Park Elementary. At Lurie Children's Hospital, while Leo was with his neuromuscular specialist, a pediatrician examined Maya. Arthur stood in the hallway, his phone pressed to his ear. "Marcus, I need a complete workup on the Jones family. Mother recently deceased, 2 children, Maya 6 and Jordan 9. Yes, a full background check. And get in touch with Judge Price. We might need to file for emergency temporary guardianship. No, I'm not getting into it over the phone. Just make it happen." Inside the examination room, the doctor's face was grim as he listened to Maya's congested breathing. "How long have you had this cough, sweetie?" "A couple of weeks, I guess," Maya admitted. Arthur re-entered the room just in time to hear the diagnosis: advanced pneumonia, coupled with severe malnutrition and exhaustion. Without immediate and proper medical intervention, the doctor explained quietly to Arthur, this child's condition could become critical within a matter of days. Just then, Arthur's phone vibrated with a text from his security chief. "Boy located, frightened but unharmed, awaiting your instructions." Arthur looked at Maya, so small and fragile on the examination table, and then at Leo, who was watching her with an expression of deep concern. His son had made a real connection today, a friend who saw past his wheelchair to the boy inside. And Arthur, too, had found something, a sense of purpose that went beyond boardrooms and balance sheets, beyond even his role as Leo's father. He only hoped he wasn't too late to make a difference. By the time the sun set over the city, the guest wing of the Sterling Mansion in Kenwood had 2 new temporary residents. Jordan Jones stood like a sentinel beside his sister's bed, his weary eyes suspiciously tracking the every move of the private nurse Arthur had hired. It had taken Arthur's security team nearly 2 hours to locate him and coax him out of hiding, and he had only agreed to come after a tearful phone call with Maya. "Her fever is down to 101, the nurse told Maya gently. "The antibiotics are beginning to work." Jordan hadn't moved from Maya's side since his arrival, refusing all offers of food until she was awake and lucid. His thin face was a mask of distrust as he confronted Arthur. "Why are you doing this? People don't just do things for nothing." Arthur, seated in a chair by the window, recognized the hardened skepticism of the streets. "Sometimes people do things because it's the right thing to do, Jordan." "Not billionaires," Jordan retorted. "I read about you on the computers at the library, Sterling Systems, worth $70 billion. People like you don't help people like us unless there's something in it for you." Before Arthur could formulate a reply, Leo wheeled himself into the room, a brightly illustrated book resting on his lap. The hostility in Jordan's expression softened almost imperceptibly at the sight of the other boy. "I brought this for Maya," Leo said, holding the book out to Jordan. "It's about a girl who saves a whole kingdom. My dad used to read it to me when I was sick." Jordan took the book, his movements cautious. "She likes stories. Mom used to..." His voice cracked, and he fell silent. Arthur watched as his son, with an empathy that belied his years, skillfully navigated the conversation with the traumatized older boy. Leo's own challenges had forged in him a unique understanding of suffering. "My mom died too. When I was 4, Leo said softly. "It still hurts. My dad says it's okay to feel sad." Jordan's defensive posture eased slightly. "How long are we allowed to stay here?" "For as long as you need," Arthur answered. "My lawyers are already preparing the paperwork for temporary guardianship. No one is going to separate you." Maya stirred, her eyelids fluttering open. "Jordan," she called out weakly. "I'm right here, Maya," he said, rushing to her side. "We're in a mansion. There's food and hot showers and everything." Maya's gaze found Arthur, then Leo. "You helped us," she whispered. Arthur moved closer to the bed. "You helped Leo first," he said. "I'm just returning the favor." Later that evening, after Mia had managed some broth and drifted back to sleep, Arthur found Jordan alone in the mansion's vast library, tracing the spines of the leather-bound volumes with his fingertips. "Our mom was a literature professor at the University of Chicago before she got sick," Jordan said, his voice quiet. "Cancer. She didn't have insurance. We lost the apartment a few weeks after the funeral." Arthur sat in the armchair opposite him. "My mother cleaned offices in the Loop. She died of a heart attack when I was 15. No insurance either." Jordan looked up, his expression one of surprise. "But you're rich now." "I wasn't always," Arthur said, leaning forward. "Jordan, I need you to understand something. This isn't charity. This is an opportunity. For Maya, for you, and to be honest, for Leo. He's never had friends who just treated him like a regular kid. What happens when Maya's better?" The question was heavy with a mixture of fear and nascent hope. That's partly up to you two, Arthur said carefully. There's an excellent private school not far from here, the Latin School. They have programs for gifted children, which I have a strong suspicion you both are. They also have outstanding resources for students with physical challenges like Leo. Jordan's eyes narrowed again. We can't pay for a place like that. I can. And what do we have to do in return? Arthur met the boy's wary gaze without flinching. Be kids. Do your homework. And look out for Leo sometimes, the way Maya did today. That's it. Jordan didn't answer right away. His young mind was clearly racing, weighing years of ingrained distrust against the possibility of a stable future. Maya's really smart, he said finally. She taught herself German from library books and videos online? Arthur nodded. I gathered as much. What about you? A flicker of pride crossed Jordan's face. Math. I'm good with numbers. Arthur smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes, recognizing a kindred spirit. Then you and I will have a lot to talk about. But for now, let's just focus on getting your sister healthy. We'll take it one day at a time. Agreed? Jordan gave a slow, cautious nod, the first glimmer of hope finally breaking through his hardened exterior. Outside the library, Leo sat in his wheelchair, having listened to the entire exchange. For the first time since his mother's death, his father sounded like his old self again. And for the first time in his own life, Leo had friends who saw him, not the chair he sat in. Everything was changing, faster than any of them could have imagined. 3 weeks later, Maya's health had been completely restored. The guest wing of the Sterling mansion was no longer a sterile, temporary space. It had been transformed with colorful quilts, overflowing bookshelves, and a high-performance computer on Jordan's new desk. The most significant change, however, was in Leo. He smiled more freely, pushed himself harder in his physical therapy sessions, and faced each day with a newfound sense of determination. "Higher, Mr. Arthur!" Maya shouted with glee as Arthur pushed her on the swing set he'd had installed in the garden. Jordan and Leo were seated at a nearby patio table, deeply engrossed in a game of chess that, to everyone's surprise, Leo was winning. Arthur obliged, sending the swing soaring as Maya's delighted laughter filled the afternoon air. From the terrace overlooking the garden, Marcus Thorne, Arthur's chief legal counsel, watched the scene with a deeply troubled expression on his face. Later, while the children were watching a movie in the home theater, Marcus confronted his employer in the study. "The full background check on the Jones family is complete," he said, placing a thick manila folder on Arthur's mahogany desk. Their mother, Dr. Alana Jones, was a respected professor at UChicago. Died of pancreatic cancer 3 months ago. But there's a complication. Arthur's expression darkened. Go on. Their father isn't deceased, as the children were led to believe, Marcus said. His name is Michael Jones. He's currently serving a 10-year sentence at Stateville Correctional Center for aggravated fraud and embezzlement. He siphoned research grant money from the university, nearly ruining Dr. Jones's career before their divorce 6 years ago. He becomes eligible for parole in 8 months. Arthur leaned back in his chair, processing the unwelcome information. The children think he's dead. According to a statement from Alana's sister, she told them he died in a car crash when Maya was an infant. She wanted to shield them from the truth of what he did. Marcus hesitated. There's more. Alana's sister, Helen Vance, has been trying to find the children ever since Alana passed. DCFS lost track of them after they ran from their last temporary placement. "Find her," Arthur commanded. "Set up a meeting as soon as possible." 2 days later, Helen Vance sat in Arthur's office, her eyes still puffy from an emotional reunion with her niece and nephew. The children were now giving their aunt a tour of the expansive garden, with Leo and his nurse accompanying them. "Thank you," Helen said, for what must have been the 20th time. "I've been frantic. I was on a diplomatic posting in Brussels when Alana died. By the time I got back to the States, they were gone." "They were living on the streets," Arthur explained gently. Jordan was keeping them hidden, trying to avoid being separated by the system. Helen nodded, a fresh wave of sadness washing over her. He's a smart boy. What Michael did to Alana almost destroyed her. She was so determined that the children would never have to carry the shame of it. And now, Arthur began cautiously, I imagine you'll want to take them to live with you. Helen studied him for a long moment. Mr. Sterling, I live in a one-bedroom apartment in D.C., and my job requires international travel for more than half the year. I love those children more than anything, but to uproot them again after everything they've endured? She trailed off, her gaze drifting toward the garden. They seem so happy here. And your son? They've formed a real bond. Arthur nodded. Leo has never had friends like them, children who see past his disability. He paused. I've filed for emergency temporary guardianship. It's set to expire in a week. I was planning to file for an extension, but if you... What if we pursued a joint guardianship? Helen suggested, her eyes lighting up with the sudden idea. I could visit whenever I'm stateside, take them for holidays. But they would have stability here, a real home, at least until... She couldn't bring herself to finish the sentence. Until their father is released on parole, Arthur finished for her, his tone grim. Helen's face grew pale. You know about that. My legal team is very thorough. The children have no idea, she said, shaking her head. Alana wanted to protect them. Michael was charming, but he was a parasite. When he stole that money, he tried to frame her for it. He almost succeeded. Through the large office window, they could see Maya helping Leo toss pieces of bread to the koi in the garden pond, their faces illuminated with simple joy. Jordan stood nearby, his protective stance now relaxed and easy. 8 months, Arthur mused aloud. A great deal can change in 8 months. Helen looked at him, her expression shrewd. What are you planning, Mr. Sterling? Arthur's face remained impassive. Nothing illegal, I assure you. But I am a man who protects his assets, Ms. Vance, and those children have become very important to my son. And to you, she observed, her insight hitting its mark. Arthur didn't deny it. I started with nothing. I put myself through Northwestern on scholarships and by working 3 jobs. I know what it's like to have potential, but no path forward. And you see that potential in Jordan and Maya, Helen said, a sad smile touching her lips. Alana would have liked you. She always believed education was the ultimate equalizer. Outside, Maya had managed to coax Leo from his wheelchair onto a blanket on the grass, where she was patiently teaching him how to weave a daisy chain. The simple, profound image, a child who had possessed nothing teaching a child who had everything, solidified a resolve that had been growing in Arthur's mind for weeks. We have 8 months, he said, with a quiet, steely determination. Let's make every day count. Jordan Jones adjusted the knot on his new navy and gold uniform tie for the 3rd time, staring at his reflection in the polished mirror of the boys' restroom at the Latin School of Chicago. 6 weeks at the Sterling Mansion had wrought a physical transformation. Consistent, nutritious meals had filled out his once gaunt features, and a stylish haircut framed a face that was beginning to shed its last vestiges of childhood. The internal changes, however, were even more profound. You ready? Leo asked from his wheelchair in the doorway. They were going to be late for the opening assembly if Jordan didn't hurry. Just nervous, Jordan admitted. Everyone here, their families have so much money, Leo smiled. You get used to it. Besides, you're smarter than half of them. The entrance exams had confirmed Arthur's suspicions. Both Jones' children were academically gifted. Jordan's math scores were at a 10th grade level, a remarkable feat considering the months of schooling he had missed. Maya's aptitude for languages was equally astonishing. She was fluent in German and was now absorbing Spanish at a breathtaking pace. The Latin school had offered both of them full scholarships, funded through one of Arthur's educational foundations, a detail that was kept confidential. What if they find out about us, Jordan whispered. That we were on the streets, Leo shrugged. My dad says everyone has a backstory. Yours is just more interesting than most. Meanwhile, in the elementary wing, Maya was confronting her own first-day anxieties, though she concealed them with more poise. The crisp uniform dress and patent leather shoes felt alien after so many months in the same ragged clothes. Her new teacher, Mrs. Delaney, who had been discreetly briefed on her circumstances, watched her with a kind and attentive eye. "Class, we have a new student joining us today," Mrs. Delaney announced. "This is Maya Jones. Maya, would you like to tell the class a little something about yourself?" Maya stood, her posture impeccable, another result of her time in the Sterling household, where the kindly housekeeper, Mrs. Petrova, had gently tutored both children in etiquette. "I like to learn new languages and read stories," Maya said, her voice clear and steady, "and I'm very happy to be here." A girl in the front row with a perfectly coiffed blonde ponytail raised her hand. "What school did you go to before this one?" Maya paused. Arthur and her Aunt Helen had concocted a plausible cover story, but the idea of lying felt wrong. "I was homeschooled," she said at last. It was technically true, if one counted self-education in the quiet corners of Chicago's public libraries. At lunchtime, Maya sat with Leo in the bustling cafeteria. They were waiting for Jordan, whose lunch period was later, but who had promised to check on them. The air was thick with curious whispers about the new children living in the famous Sterling mansion. "Is it true you're Arthur Sterling's secret love child?" a bold sixth grader asked Maya directly. Before she could respond, Bryce Davenport, the same boy from the playground, swaggered up to their table. "She's not his daughter," Bryce said with a sneer. "She's just some charity case he took in. My parents were talking about it. She was homeless before he found her. She probably has fleas." Leo's face flushed with anger. "Shut up, Bryce." But Maya remained calm, her gaze meeting Bryce's without wavering. "I was homeless," she acknowledged, her voice carrying with enough clarity to silence the nearby tables. "My mother passed away, and my brother and I were on our own until Mr. Sterling helped us. I'm not ashamed of where I came from." The cafeteria grew even quieter as Jordan appeared, placing a protective hand on his sister's shoulder. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his eyes locked on Bryce. Bryce, wilting under the combined glare of the three of them, mumbled, "Whatever," and made a hasty retreat. That evening Arthur found the three children in the library, huddled together as Jordan recounted the lunchtime confrontation. "And then Maya just owned it," Jordan was saying, his voice filled with pride. You should have seen the look on Bryce's face. Arthur cleared his throat, and the children looked up a little guiltily. "A challenging first day?" Maya shook her head. "Not challenging, just new." Arthur sat with them, listening as they shared the day's events. Leo had fiercely defended his new friends. Jordan had aced a diagnostic math test, stunning his teacher, and Maya had earned the praise of her German instructor, a native speaker from Berlin, who was astounded by her fluency. "I have something I want to show you," Arthur said when they had finished. He led them into his home office, where a massive world map covered one wall. The map was dotted with pins of 3 different colors. "Green for Jordan, purple for Maya, and red for Leo," he explained. "These are all places I think you might want to see one day, based on your talents and interests." Jordan's green pins marked locations like NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the headquarters of major tech companies in Silicon Valley, and MIT. Maya's purple pins highlighted cities renowned for their culture and languages: Paris, Rome, Kyoto. Leo's red pins were placed over the world's leading medical research institutions, centers that were pioneering new treatments for conditions like his. "This is my promise to you," Arthur said, his voice resonating with sincerity. "You work hard, you dream big, and I will help you get to these places. Not as tourists, but as students, as innovators, as whatever you choose to become." The children stared at the map, their eyes wide with a universe of possibilities they had never dared to imagine. Later, as Arthur was tucking Maya into bed, a nightly ritual she still cherished despite her fierce independence, she asked the question that had been lingering in her mind all day. "Why did you really decide to help us, Mr. Arthur?" He considered his answer for a moment. "Because sometimes people walk into your life at the exact moment you need them. You helped Leo find his courage, and maybe, in return, he and I could help you and Jordan find a safe harbor." Maya studied him with an astuteness that was far beyond her years. "But you're still sad sometimes. I can see it in your eyes." Arthur managed a faint smile. "That's very perceptive of you, Maya. Yes, I miss Leo's mother very much. Some kinds of sadness never entirely disappear." "Like with my mom," Maya nodded with understanding. "But it's better when you have people who get it." Arthur gently arranged the blankets around her. "Yes," he said softly. "Yes, it is." What he didn't say, what he couldn't yet articulate, was how much these two resilient children were mending a part of him he thought had been permanently shattered by his wife's death, or how fiercely he was prepared to protect them when their father inevitably reemerged from the shadows. Some battles, he knew, were best left for another day. The ornate grandfather clock in the foyer of the Sterling mansion chimed midnight as Arthur sifted through a mountain of legal paperwork in his study. 3 months had passed since Maya and Jordan had arrived, 3 months of astonishing growth, healing, and an increasingly tangled legal web. "The joint guardianship with Helen Vance is secure for now," Marcus Thorne assured him, sliding another document across the desk for a signature. "But if Michael Jones challenges it when he's released—" Arthur's jaw clenched. 5 more months until his parole hearing. I want every possible contingency planned for." A light knock on the study door interrupted them. Helen Vance stood in the entryway. She had arrived that evening for her monthly visit with the children. "Sorry to interrupt," she said. "I couldn't sleep and saw the light on." Arthur waved her in. "We're just wargaming the inevitable." Helen took a seat, her diplomatic poise unshaken despite the late hour. "Michael will sue for custody," she stated, her tone devoid of any illusion, "not because he gives a damn about the children, but because he'll see them as a pawn." "A pawn for what?" Marcus asked. "Money, public sympathy, a way to get back at me and Alana's memory. Whatever he can squeeze out of the situation," Helen said, her voice laced with years of bitterness. "He charmed my sister, then he bled her dry emotionally and financially. He'll try to do the same thing to those kids if he gets the chance." Arthur's phone buzzed. It was a notification from the smart home security system indicating movement in the children's wing. "Excuse me," he said, pulling up the live feed on his tablet. The infrared camera showed Maya, her face etched with worry, even in sleep, walking down the hallway. Her sleepwalking had started during her 2nd week at the mansion. The pediatrician had attributed it to post-traumatic stress and grief, predicting it would subside as her environment became more stable. "I should go to her," Arthur said, starting to rise. "Let me," Helen offered. "I'd like to feel useful while I'm here." Arthur hesitated for a second, then nodded his assent. As Helen departed, Marcus continued to outline their legal strategy. "We've gathered a mountain of evidence detailing Jones's unsuitability as a parent, his criminal conviction, a documented history of domestic disputes, a gambling addiction." "And if the court doesn't see that as enough," Arthur cut in. Marcus looked uneasy. "There are other avenues, less conventional ones." "If you're suggesting we bribe a judge, Marcus, the answer is no." "Of course not. But certain information about Mr. Jones's conduct in prison could find its way to the parole board. Participation in illicit activities, altercations with other inmates, things that might cause a delay in his release." Arthur shook his head firmly. "We fight this battle honorably. Those children have been exposed to enough deceit to last a lifetime." The door opened again and Helen returned, her expression deeply troubled. "She was in Jordan's room," she reported. "He says it happens often. She goes in most nights just to make sure he's still there. Tonight she was talking in her sleep. She kept saying, 'Daddy's coming to take us.' Arthur frowned. I thought they believed their father was dead. Helen sank into a chair. They do. That's what makes it so disturbing. Her subconscious could be processing her fear of being taken away, just attaching it to the only father figure she knows. Or, Marcus suggested, she knows more than we think she does. Impossible, Helen insisted. Alana was adamant. Neither of them has any conscious memory of Michael. The divorce was finalized when Maya was barely a year old. Arthur's gaze fell on a framed photograph on his desk, himself, Leo, and his late wife Eleanor, taken just 6 months before the aggressive cancer had claimed her. Leo shared Maya's tendency to be an old soul, wise beyond his years. Children perceive more than we give them credit for, he said quietly. Marcus, schedule that sleep study we discussed. Let's rule out any physiological issues with Maya. The next morning, Arthur found Jordan in the kitchen alone, meticulously slicing strawberries for their breakfast with a mathematician's precision. Did Maya sleep well after her little excursion? Arthur asked nonchalantly. Jordan glanced up, his expression guarded. She never remembers it when she does that. But you do, every time. Jordan nodded, resuming his task. She's worried about something. In her sleep, she keeps saying, "He's coming." Do you have any idea who she might mean? Jordan's knife stilled. Sometimes I think she remembers him, our dad. Arthur kept his face a careful mask of neutrality, despite the shock that coursed through him. The father who died when Maya was an infant? That's what Mom told us. Jordan's voice dropped to a near whisper. But one time, a long time ago, I found some old letters. Mom was crying when she was reading them. They were from prison, Arthur, from our dad. Arthur's heart pounded in his chest. Did you ever tell Maya? Jordan shook his head vehemently. No, never. She was just a baby. I put the letters back where I found them and never said a word. He looked up then, his eyes burning with a fierce, protective love for his sister. You won't let him take us away if he comes back, will you? The raw plea in the boy's voice struck Arthur with the force of a physical blow. Jordan, no one is taking you anywhere. This is your home now for as long as you want it to be. Before Jordan could reply, Maya bounded into the kitchen, her nighttime anxieties seemingly forgotten in the bright morning light. Aunt Helen is taking us to the shed aquarium today, she announced cheerfully. Arthur watched as Jordan's serious demeanor instantly melted away, replaced by an easy smile as he shifted into Big Brother mode. The boy was carrying far too many secrets, far too many burdens for his young shoulders. And now, Arthur realized, he was carrying them too. Later, as Helen was getting the children ready for their outing, Arthur pulled her aside. We have to tell them the truth about their father, and we have to do it soon. Helen's face went pale. Arthur, it will crush them. Jordan already knows, or at least he suspects, and Maya's subconscious is clearly wrestling with something. It's better they hear it from us than have it sprung on them when he shows up on our doorstep. Helen nodded reluctantly. After the holidays. Let them have one more happy, untroubled Christmas first. Arthur agreed, but as he watched the children leave with their aunt, a deep sense of foreboding settled over him. The shadow of Michael Jones was growing longer, threatening the fragile peace they had so carefully constructed. He feared the approaching storm would test them all in ways they couldn't yet imagine, especially Maya, whose troubled dreams suggested she remembered far more than anyone knew. A gentle snow was falling outside the grand windows of the Sterling mansion, and the sound of Christmas carols drifted through the festively decorated halls. 4 months had passed since the Jones children had entered their lives, and the transformation in all of them was nothing short of miraculous. Jordan was excelling at the Latin school, particularly in advanced mathematics and computer science. Maya was now fluent in Spanish as well as German, and her reading comprehension was at a 4th grade level, though she was only 6. Leo, too, had undergone a significant change. A new, more intensive physical therapy regimen had dramatically increased his upper body strength. He still relied on his wheelchair, but he could now transfer himself in and out of it without assistance, a small freedom that filled him with immense pride. In the formal living room, Maya was orchestrating the decorating of the towering Christmas tree with the authority of a seasoned general. "The star has to go on last, Leo," she instructed, as Leo held the shimmering ornament with impatience. "It's the most important tradition." "Hawk!" Arthur watched from the doorway, a bittersweet smile playing on his lips. His late wife, Eleanor, had been just as passionate about Christmas traditions. This was their second Christmas without her, but it was the first one that felt genuinely joyful again. "Dad," Leo called out, having spotted him. "Maya says we need to hang stockings for everyone. Do we have enough?" "I believe Mrs. Petrova anticipated that," Arthur replied, stepping into the room. "And your Aunt Helen will be here tomorrow for Christmas Eve." Jordan looked up from his task of artfully arranging pine boughs on the mantel. "Is she staying through New Year's this time?" "Until January 3rd, Arthur confirmed. The truth about Michael Jones remained a heavy unspoken secret. Helen had persuaded Arthur to wait until after the holidays, arguing passionately that the children deserved one perfect worry-free Christmas. Arthur had agreed, though the knowledge was a constant weight on his mind, especially after learning that Michael Jones had been transferred to a minimum security facility, a move that often preceded an early parole hearing. Later that evening, while the children were engrossed in a Christmas movie, Arthur's phone rang. The caller ID showed a private number he recognized as belonging to the discreet investigations firm he'd retained to monitor Michael Jones. "Excuse me," he murmured, retreating to his study and closing the door. "Sterling?" "Sir, we have a development." The investigator's voice was clipped and professional. "Jones was involved in an altercation today. Contraband was discovered in his cell during the subsequent search. His parole hearing has been postponed by at least 3 months. A wave of relief washed over Arthur, followed by a pang of guilt. He had not authorized any direct interference, but the timing was undeniably convenient. "What kind of contraband?" "Narcotics. Not his, he claims. Says he was set up." Arthur frowned. "Was he?" "Not by our people, sir. We are strictly in an observational capacity. But Jones has a reputation for making enemies. The word is he owes money to some very dangerous individuals and promised to pay them back upon his release." This information aligned perfectly with Helen's assessment of her former brother-in-law. Michael Jones was a con artist who left a trail of destruction wherever he went. The thought of such a man ever getting his hands on Maya and Jordan made Arthur's blood run cold. "Maintain surveillance," Arthur instructed, "and discreetly increase the security here at the house." The next morning, Christmas Eve, Helen arrived with an armful of presents and some news of her own. While the children were happily occupied in the kitchen, baking holiday cookies with Mrs. Petrova, she and Arthur convened in his study. "The State Department has offered me a senior post at the embassy in London," she announced without preamble. "It's a 2-year commitment starting in February." Arthur absorbed the news. "Congratulations. That's a significant promotion. But what does this mean for the children?" "That's why I wanted to tell you in person. The joint guardianship arrangement was viable, because I could visit frequently from D.C., from London." She spread her hands in a gesture of helplessness. "You could petition the court to grant me sole guardianship," Arthur suggested. Helen shook her head. "Michael would fight it tooth and nail. My status as their blood relative is what gives our current arrangement its legal strength. Without me in the picture?" She hesitated. "There is another way." "Adoption," Arthur said, voicing the possibility that had been taking root in his own mind for months. He'd fight that even harder, he pointed out. "Yes," Helen agreed, "but an adoption hearing would force a formal evaluation of his fitness as a parent. His criminal record, his abandonment of the children, his history of manipulation, it would all be brought into the light. And if the children themselves were to express a preference, they're still very young. The court might not give significant weight to their wishes," Arthur countered, though the idea was solidifying in his mind, "and besides, they still don't know he's alive." Helen's expression became resolute. "Then it's time we told them. After Christmas, as we planned. I'll be here to help you do it." Their conversation was cut short as the study door flew open and Maya ran in, a dusting of flour on her cheek. "Aunt Helen, we made gingerbread people that looked just like us. Come and see." She grabbed her aunt's hand, tugging her toward the door, then paused, her perceptive gaze taking in their serious expressions. "Is something wrong?" "Just boring grown-up talk," Arthur assured her with a warm smile. "Nothing for you to worry about." Maya's eyes lingered on him for a moment longer. "You're worried about something, I can tell." Arthur was once again struck by her emotional acuity. "Just business, Maya. Nothing for you to concern yourself with." But as Maya led Helen out of the room, Arthur couldn't shake the feeling that their carefully ordered world was poised on the edge of a precipice. The coming months would be a battle, a fight to determine whether the fragile, beautiful family they had built could withstand the storm that was gathering on the horizon, a storm named Michael Jones. Christmas morning was a blur of fresh snow, joyful chaos, and the scent of cinnamon rolls. For a few precious hours, Arthur allowed himself to push aside his anxieties and simply bask in the unadulterated delight on three young faces as they tore open presents. Leo received a new adaptive gaming console he'd been dreaming of. Jordan's eyes lit up at a state-of-the-art telescope and a collection of advanced programming textbooks. And Maya was thrilled with a set of language-learning software and a beautifully bound collection of classic fairy tales. "This is the best Christmas I've ever had," Maya declared, her eyes shining as she looked around at her new family. Arthur silently prayed that it would not be their last one together.